Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, Anxious Summons to Rosehill Court. The countryside rolled past like a gentle green sea as Hercule Poirot sat upright in the back of the hired motorcar, his gloved hands folded neatly over his cane. The crisp autumn air danced with shades of amber and rust, and the narrow road wound through quiet farmland toward the hill where Rosehill Court presided, a grand, dignified estate with a history as old as the land itself. Poirot had travelled from London at short notice, summoned by a most urgent telegram from Lady Samina Qureshi, widely known to society as Begum. Her request had been written with a tremor of desperation, quite unlike her well-known composure. For a woman of her stature to seek help so quickly, and from him personally, spoke of a matter weighted with emotion, fear, or both. As the motorcar pulled through the stone gates, Poirot leaned forward, observing every detail. The garden beds were neatly trimmed, yet a few fallen leaves lay unswept, giving the impression of a household distracted. Two gardeners worked silently near the fountain, their eyes momentarily lifting toward the approaching vehicle before returning to the ground with unexplained unease. Poirot's moustaches curled with interest. "Something is amiss," Hastings would say, he murmured to himself. And for once, he would be right. The motorcar halted before the entrance steps of the venerable manor. Its tall windows glinted faintly in the pale sun, and the heavy oak doors stood half open, as if the house itself awaited him anxiously. A maid hurried forward to greet him, her face pale and her hands nervously smoothing the front of her apron. "Monsieur Poirot? Lady Qureshi is expecting you at once, sir." Poirot inclined his head graciously and stepped inside. The entrance hall was magnificent yet strangely cold. A sweeping staircase commanded the center, and portraits of Qureshi ancestors lined the walls, stern faces fixed in oil, overseeing the present with unforgiving eyes. But what caught Poirot's attention was not the grandeur, it was the tension in the air, subtle yet heavy, like a whispered argument that lingered long after the participants had fled. He had barely removed his hat when the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Begum herself appeared, tall, poised, and dressed in deep emerald silk that shimmered in the filtered daylight. But her regal composure was strained, her eyes bore the unmistakable shadow of sleepless nights. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a trembling hand. "I am deeply grateful you have come. This is not a matter I could entrust to anyone else." Poirot bowed politely. "Madam, when one calls upon Hercule Poirot, he arrives with all the promptness that dignity allows. You are troubled, yes? Let us see what may be done." She motioned for him to follow her into a drawing room overlooking the gardens. It was a rich, elegant space with velvet drapes, polished silver frames, and a large fireplace where embers glowed weakly. Yet the room felt strangely incomplete, as if an invisible wound had opened within it. Begum gestured for him to sit, though she herself remained standing, wringing her hands. "It is my heirloom, Monsieur Poirot. My family's most precious possession. The sapphire crescent, it has vanished." Poirot raised one eyebrow gently. "Vanished? And the circumstances, madam?" "Stolen," she whispered. "Taken from the locked display cabinet in my private sitting room. There was no forced entry, no disturbance. The key was in my handbag the entire time." She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "And the staff, they swear none of them touched it." She paused before continuing in a low, pained voice. "Poirot, I believe my daughter, Olya, has taken it." Poirot studied her face carefully. The muscles in her jaw tightened as she spoke the name. It was not the easy accusation of an irritated parent, it was the dreadful admission of someone who feared what their suspicion might mean. "Your daughter?" Poirot repeated softly. She is young, I presume. 16, Begum replied. Headstrong, and recently quite distant. She has been spending time where she should not, sneaking out, concealing things from me. And the night before the jewel disappeared, I found her near the cabinet. Her breath hitched. She denies everything, of course. But what else am I to think? Poirot placed the fingertips of both hands together, forming his familiar steeple. Madam, you invite Hercule Poirot, and so you must allow him to speak with the voice of reason. To accuse the youth, especially one's own child, is not a step taken lightly. We shall allow the evidence to speak for itself, yes. Begum lowered herself into a chair at last, the weight of worry sinking her shoulders. Yes, yes, of course. I only want the truth, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever it may be. Poirot stood and gave her a reassuring nod. The little grey cells will do their work. But first, I must speak with Mademoiselle Ollier. Begum hesitated. She is in the conservatory. But Monsieur Poirot, she clasped her hands, fighting tears she refused to shed. If she is guilty, if she truly did this, I do not know what I shall do. Poirot's expression softened. Madam, let us never borrow sorrow from the future. Facts first, emotions after. As he turned to leave, he paused near an ornate side table. On it stood a silver-framed photograph of a younger Begum holding a smiling child, Ollier, no more than 8 years old, radiant with innocence. Poirot studied the picture closely before addressing Begum once more. Tell me, madam, the sapphire crescent, it holds a sentimental value, does it not? Begum pressed a hand to her throat. It belonged to my grandmother. It is the symbol of our family's legacy. Poirot nodded slowly. And the loss of such a piece wounds not only the pocketbook, but the heart. With that, he stepped out into the corridor, the echo of his polished shoes mingling with the faint, distant sound of someone quietly weeping, whether from sorrow, guilt, or something far more complex, Poirot could not yet tell. But he would. For Hercule Poirot always finds the truth. Chapter 2, A Household on Edge. The conservatory at Rosehill Court was a long, glass-walled haven filled with pale morning light. Dew clung to the windows, casting soft, shimmering patterns across the tiled floor. Rows of orchids, ferns, and delicate climbing vines created the illusion of a miniature jungle tamed by elegant care. Yet even this peaceful room hummed with tension the moment Hercule Poirot stepped inside. At the far end, seated on a cushioned bench beneath a hanging ivy plant, was Hercule Qureshi, the daughter accused of the terrible theft. She was a slight girl with expressive dark eyes, her schoolbook spread open before her though she did not appear to be reading. Her head rested against her knees, hugging them gently as if shrinking from the world. Poirot paused a moment to observe her unseen. Young faces often revealed more truth in stillness than in speech. He noticed the faint tremble in her hand, the way she pressed her lips tightly together, and the redness beneath her eyes, evidence of tears shed in solitude. He cleared his throat softly. Mademoiselle Ollier. She jolted slightly, lifting her head with a startled breath. Oh, I'm Monsieur Poirot. Mother said you had arrived. Her voice was fragile, trying to hold strength it did not possess. Poirot moved closer, taking a seat across from her. May I join you, mademoiselle? She nodded. Your mother is distressed, Poirot began gently, and distress sometimes casts shadows where none exist. She believes, unjustly perhaps, that you have taken the sapphire crescent. Ollier looked away sharply, as though the word stung her. I didn't take anything, she whispered. But she won't believe me. Nobody will. Poirot folded his hands in his lap. You are upset that suspicion falls upon you. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I'm her daughter. How could she think I'd steal something so precious? She didn't even ask me what happened, she just decided. Poirot studied her face. Not guilt, he thought. Hurt. Deep, aching hurt. Tell me, mademoiselle, Poirot said softly, what were you doing near the cabinet that night? Olya hesitated, chewing her lower lip. I shouldn't have been there. I know. But I wasn't touching the jewel. I only wanted to see it. Why? She looked at him then, properly, with a flicker of defiance. Because it's the only thing of my grandmother's that mother keeps out. Everything else is locked away or hidden. I just wanted to feel close to her. Poirot nodded slowly. And did you notice anything unusual? A noise, perhaps? A person passing in the corridor. Olya's gaze shifted toward the glass door. I heard someone walking. Slow steps, and I think they paused outside the room. But when I turned, no one was there. Poirot leaned forward slightly. The steps, heavy or light? Light, Olya said after a moment. Like someone trying not to be heard. Poirot's moustache twitched. Très intéressant. The conservatory door opened, and Mrs. Bramble, the housekeeper, entered with a watering can. She stopped short when she saw the detective. Oh. Terribly sorry, sir. Didn't know anyone was in here. Poirot offered her a polite nod. You are Mrs. Bramble, yes? Housekeeper for the family. That's right, sir. Her voice held the stiff pride of someone who had served the household for many years. Is everything all right? Poirot smiled gently. We are merely talking with the young mademoiselle. Mrs. Bramble's eyes flicked to Olya, softening with pity, but also with worry, as though she knew something she dared not say. If you need anything, sir, I'll be in the main hall, she said before leaving quickly, perhaps too quickly. Olya let out a long breath. She doesn't think I did it, you know. But she won't say so. Mother has the strong presence. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A formidable personality, yes. Olya managed a weak smile. That's a polite way of putting it. Poirot changed the subject gently. Tell me, mademoiselle, your relationship with your mother. Lately, there is tension. Olya's expression hardened. She wants me to be someone I'm not. Perfect. Silent. Polished. She picked at the edge of her sleeve. But I'm trying, I really am. Poirot nodded sympathetically. And does she often mistrust you? Olya hesitated. No. Not like this. This is different. She swallowed. She's been strange for weeks. Preoccupied. Snapping at everyone. Even at me. Poirot made a thoughtful sound. Change often has a reason, mademoiselle. She shook her head. I don't know what it is. A shadow moved outside the conservatory. The maid Phoebe poked her head in timidly. Olya? Your mother is asking for you. Olya wiped her eyes, gathering her books. I'll come, she murmured. She gave Poirot one last searching glance, as if silently begging him to believe her. Poirot placed a hand over his heart. Mademoiselle, I give you my word, I shall pursue only the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. Olya nodded and left with Phoebe. When she was gone, Poirot stood alone among the flowers and the fading sunlight. It was then he noticed something curious, a smear of soil on the floor leading toward the back door. A small, partial footprint. The soil was fresh, dark, rich, recently disturbed. Not from the neatly kept pots in the conservatory. No, this soil had come from outside. Poirot crouched to examine it more closely. A footprint, he murmured. But whose? And why here, of all places? As he stood, a quiet cough sounded behind him. It was Mr. Rauf Siddiqui, Begum's secretary, standing stiffly in the doorway, his dark hair neat, his face uncomfortable. "Apologies, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't mean to intrude." "You are welcome, Monsieur," Poirot said warmly. "A household is easily disturbed when the winds of suspicion blow." Rauf gave a thin, uneasy smile. "Quite so. Lady Qureshi is very distressed. We all hope you will settle things quickly." Poirot tilted his head. "You speak as though the matter troubles you personally." Rauf's jaw tightened. "I work closely with Lady Qureshi. If there is scandal, it reflects on all of us." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And what is your relationship with the young Mademoiselle Ollier?" Rauf blinked at the unexpected question. "We have polite interactions. Nothing more." "Why?" Poirot shrugged lightly. "I ask only what is necessary, Monsieur." Before Rauf could reply, a bell echoed through the manor, Begum summoning the household. Rauf exhaled and stepped aside. "I suppose we are all wanted." "Please, after you." Poirot walked back toward the hall, his mind ticking like a well-wound clock. There was tension in this house stronger than fear alone, something deeper, darker, and unspoken. And the truth, he knew, was hiding in plain sight. Chapter 3: The Disappearing Clue. The private sitting room where the sapphire crescent had been displayed was a far quieter place than the rest of Rosehill Court. Thick carpets muffled footsteps, and heavy velvet curtains dimmed the light. Yet despite the stillness, Hercule Poirot felt the air buzzing with the restless anxiety of a room violated. Begum stood rigidly by the display cabinet, an elegant glass structure trimmed in gold, now tragically empty. Her fingers twisted the end of her shawl as she watched Poirot approach. Every line of her posture seemed carved from worry and restrained anger. "Here, Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice tight. "This is where it happened." Poirot surveyed the cabinet with a practiced eye. "No sign of forced entry," he murmured. "The lock is pristine." He crouched down, his gaze following the edges with meticulous attention. He noticed faint scratches, not from intrusion, but from routine polishing. Housekeepers with pride left marks of care, not crime. "And you say the key was always with you, madam?" "Always." Begum touched her handbag protectively. "I never leave it anywhere." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Never, madam." She hesitated, only for a second, but that was enough. "There are moments, of course. When I ask Phoebe to fetch something. Or when I change for dinner. But the bag stays in my room." "Ah," Poirot said softly. "The small gaps in vigilance, how tempting they are to the bold thief." Begum flinched. "You imply negligence." "None, madam." Hercule Poirot implies possibility. He opened the cabinet door gently, careful not to disturb what might remain. The faint indentation of the sapphire crescent on the velvet cushion was visible, as though the jewel still haunted the space. Something caught his eye. On the glass surface, near the lock, was a tiny smear, so faint that the untrained eye would dismiss it. But Poirot was not untrained. He leaned closer. A whisper of lavender-colored powder clung to the glass. Poirot touched it lightly with the tip of a handkerchief. "Interesting," he said quietly. "Is that all yours?" Begum asked quickly, her tone sharp with eagerness. Poirot straightened. "Do not leap to conclusions, madam. This shade of lavender is unusual. Most young girls prefer softer colors." Begum stiffened. "I use lavender powder." Poirot filed the admission away without comment. Before he could further examine the smudge, hurried footsteps approached. "Mrs. Bramble, the housekeeper swept into the room holding a dusting cloth. "Oh dear. I didn't realize you were still inspecting, sir," she said, though her cheeks flushed. "The room ought to be presentable." Poirot held up a hand. "Madam, one moment, Illinois Vause Plat." But she was already in motion. With a quickness far too convenient, she swiped the cabinet's surface with her cloth, erasing the smudge before Poirot could object further. A flicker of alarm crossed her eyes as she realized what she'd done. "Oh. I am terribly sorry, sir," she stammered. "Just habit, you see." Poirot regarded her calmly. "Madame Bramble, cleanliness is a virtue, but in a crime scene, it becomes a danger." He noticed how her hands trembled ever so slightly, not from guilt necessarily, but from fear. Fear of something. Fear of someone. Before he could question her, Begum spoke sharply. "Mrs. Bramble, you know better than to interfere during an investigation." "Yes, Lady Qureshi." "My apologies." The housekeeper bowed her head and retreated. Poirot waited until she was out of earshot before turning to Begum. "She is loyal, yes." "For decades," Begum said curtly. "She would never betray this household." Poirot gave a noncommittal nod. "Loyalty is admirable. But even the loyal grow nervous when secrets begin to surface." Begum frowned. "What do you mean?" Poirot merely smiled. "It is only an observation, madam." He returned his focus to the room, letting his eyes travel slowly across the shelves, the fireplace, the table near the window. Every room told a story, this one whispered in fragments. A notebook lay open on the desk, a gardening journal. Begum's handwriting filled the pages in neat lines, detailing planting schedules and seasonal notes. Oddly domestic for a woman of her stature. Poirot skimmed a page at lavender care, soil types, watering intervals. His brows lifted. "Madam," he said, "you grow lavender in the garden, yes?" Begum blinked, surprised by the change in direction. "Yes, but what does that have to do with the theft?" Poirot shrugged lightly. "One never knows. Crime and nature sometimes intertwine." He tucked the detail away in the vault of his mind. Poirot approached the window and noted that a thin line of dirt marked the wooden sill, almost invisible. "Soil again," he murmured. "From outside." Begum crossed her arms. "We do have gardeners, Monsieur Poirot." "Oh, Yet this soil is fresh. Disturbed recently. And not from the garden beds outside this window." He knelt carefully, examining the dirt with the precision of a jeweler evaluating a stone. It was rich, dark, moist, matching the soil in the conservatory. The conservatory where Olia had been that morning. The conservatory where a footprint had been left. A connection formed, but Poirot held it loosely for now. Jumping too soon was the enemy of truth. He rose to his feet with a sigh of satisfaction. "Madam," he said, "may I speak with Mr. Rauf Siddiqui?" Begum's face tightened. "He is my secretary, not a suspect." "In my experience," Poirot said calmly, "secretaries are often far more observant than their employers realize." Begum opened her mouth to object but closed it again with a resigned breath. "I will fetch him." When she had gone, Poirot walked once more around the room, letting his fingertips hover over surfaces without touching them. He stopped before the empty display cabinet. "A theft without force," he murmured. "A jewel taken without sound. A room cleaned too quickly. And a clue wiped away." He tapped his chin thoughtfully. "This, Poirot, is a puzzle made not of chaos but of careful arrangement." Ralph appeared at the doorway, clearing his throat politely. "You wanted to see me, Monsieur Poirot." "Ah, Monsieur Ralph," Poirot said warmly. Come in, come in." we have much to discuss." As Ralph entered, closing the door behind him, Poirot gave him a long, evaluating look. The secretary shifted under the scrutiny, as though the detective saw more than he wished to reveal. Poirot smiled gently. "In this house," he began, "everyone behaves as though the truth is a fragile thing. But you, Monsieur Ralph, you seem most aware of something hidden." Ralph swallowed. "I do not understand." Poirot tilted his head. "Oh, you will. Soon." Behind Ralph, through the slightly open door, Poirot glimpsed Olia standing at the end of the corridor, watching. Listening. Her face pale but determined. Everyone in this house, Poirot reflected, was waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for blame, waiting for truth. And the truth, as always, was beginning to whisper its way to him. *** Chapter 4. The Tangle of Threads ***. The morning sun cast a pale, wintry glow across the landscaped gardens of Rosehill Court, its light doing little to soften the anxiety simmering within the manor's walls. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall French windows of the drawing-room, his hands lightly clasped behind his back, gazing thoughtfully at the trimmed hedges and the marble fountain gleaming faintly with frost. Behind him, footsteps approached, measured, confident, and unmistakably refined. Lady Samina Qureshi entered the room, wrapped in a dark burgundy shawl, her expression composed yet undeniably strained. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice controlled. "I trust you slept well." "Perfectly, madam," Poirot replied, turning with a slight bow. "Though I confess, the atmosphere of Rosehill Court is, how shall we say, charged. There is a tension in the air one could almost slice with a knife." Lady Samina exhaled slowly. "I suppose that is inevitable. Theft has a way of disturbing one's sense of safety." "Ah, but it is not merely theft," Poirot murmured. "It is something more delicate. Something personal." His eyes gleamed with interest as she stiffened. Her reaction was small, almost imperceptible, but Poirot saw it. He saw everything. Before he could speak further, the drawing-room doors swung open and Emily Thornbridge hurried in, her cheeks flushed. "Monsieur Poirot." "Lady Samina." "You're both needed in the morning room." "The staff, they are whispering again." Lady Samina closed her eyes briefly. "Very well. Let us put an end to this once and for all." Poirot followed the two women through the corridor, the air smelling faintly of polished wood and lavender. As they reached the morning room, the scene was already unfolding. The household staff stood in a nervous cluster, Phoebe the maid clutching her apron, Mr. Farrow the butler pale but stoic, and the cook muttering anxiously under her breath. Sami, the late master's nephew, leaned against the mantelpiece with cool detachment, while Lily hovered near the window, twisting her hands. Poirot cleared his throat gently. Instantly, the room grew still. "My friends," he said, "I believe it is time we bring clarity to this little drama. You see, the theft of Lady Samina's heirloom was not an act of random malice. It was not done by an outsider, nor by a simple thief. It was a message." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. "A message?" Lady Samina repeated, her voice low. Poirot nodded. "Oh, madam. A message intended for you. Someone wished you to feel unsettled. Someone who believes you hold more power in this household than you ought." Sami straightened, eyes narrowing. "Are you implying one of us?" Poirot lifted a hand. "I imply nothing yet. I only observe. And I observe many curious things." He turned to Phoebe, the young maid who seemed on the verge of tears. "Mademoiselle, you were seen near Lady Samina's rooms the night of the incident, yes?" Phoebe swallowed hard. "Why, yes, sir. But I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was only dusting the corridor." Indeed, Poirot said gently. Yet you were not alone. The girl's head jerked up. I don't know what you mean. Oh, but you do. Poirot's voice remained soft, but his eyes, keen and unblinking, were fixed on her. You saw someone. Someone you are afraid to mention. Phoebe trembled, her fingers twisting painfully in her apron. I can't say, sir. I just can't. Lady Samina stepped forward, her tone surprisingly tender. Child, no one will harm you. If you know something, you must speak. Phoebe's lips parted, but before she could utter a word, the butler Mr. Farrow cut in sharply. This is unnecessary pressure on the staff, he said coldly. The girl has done nothing wrong. Poirot's gaze slid toward him. You are protective of her, Mr. Farrow. Of all the staff, he replied curtly. My duty is to ensure their welfare. Poirot inclined his head, though his eyes remained thoughtful. He turned next to Sami, whose expression bore a flicker of annoyance. Monsieur Sami, Poirot began, you were the last person seen near the West Wing that evening. May I ask why? Sami scoffed lightly. I live here, monsieur. I walk through corridors. Is that a crime? Poirot eyed him steadily. None. But your tension, your guarded glances at Lady Samina, these are not merely those of a grieving nephew. Sami stiffened. You know nothing about my feelings. Au contraire, Poirot responded softly. I know quite a lot. For instance, I know your uncle changed his will shortly before his passing. I know that Lady Samina now controls the estate's finances. And I know, because I have ears, that you disagree with this arrangement. Murmurs erupted among the staff. Sami's face hardened. That is family business. And hardly relevant to a missing piece of jewelry. Poirot tapped his temple delicately. Everything is relevant, my friend. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his polished shoes clicking lightly against the floor. There are threads everywhere, he said. Threads of resentment, fear, loyalty, and deceit. And when the threads pull tight, they lead to truth. His tone sharpened just slightly. Last night, someone attempted to enter Lady Samina's study again. A gasp rose in the room. Lady Samina's hand flew to her mouth. But, how do you know? Poirot smiled faintly. Because they were careless. They disturbed a small vase of lilies near the door. A vase whose position I memorized during my tour of the house. It had shifted by precisely 2 inches. Only Poirot could notice such a detail. The room grew thick with unease. Lily edged closer, her voice trembling as she spoke. Monsieur Poirot, do you think the thief will strike again? Poirot turned toward the anxious young woman. I think, mademoiselle, that the thief is growing desperate. Their objective has not been achieved. And so, they will try again. Phoebe burst into sudden sobs. Please, sir. I didn't steal anything, I swear. But I did see someone. The room leaned in. Go on, Poirot encouraged gently. Phoebe wiped her eyes. I saw Mr. Farrow near Lady Samina's room that night. The butler's face turned a shade paler. This is outrageous. Poirot lifted a hand to silence him. You deny it. I went there to check the windows. Farrow insisted. It was routine. And the safe? Poirot asked lightly. Was that also routine? Farrow froze. Poirot's voice softened, almost pitying. You see, Mr. Farrow, you are a loyal man. But loyalty can be twisted into foolishness when guided by the wrong master. Lady Samina stared at the detective. Are you saying he is the culprit? No, Poirot replied calmly. Not yet. But he knows far more than he admits. Poirot's jaw clenched. Poirot faced the room once more. The truth is close. Very close. But to reveal it, I must observe the players a little longer. Then, with a small, enigmatic smile, he added, Tonight, there may be a little trap. The room stirred with nervous anticipation. For when Poirot set a trap, it always caught something. Something important. And at Rosehill Court, the tangle of threads was tightening fast. *** Chapter 5. Shadows at midnight ***. The winter dusk fell early over Rosehill Court, shrouding the grand estate in muted shades of violet and grey. Long shadows stretched across the lawns, and a thin veil of mist began to drift from the surrounding woods. By the time the clock in the great hall chimed 8, the manor's corridors were already dim, lanterns casting trembling pools of light onto the polished floors. Hercule Poirot moved with unhurried steps through the west wing, his hands resting neatly upon his lapels. Tonight, his manner was especially composed, a serenity that masked the intricate strategy unfolding in his mind. He paused at the door to Lady Samina's study, glancing at the small vase of lilies he had previously mentioned. Once again, its placement was off, not by inches this time, but by a mere fraction. A shift so trivial most eyes would dismiss it entirely. But Poirot's eyes were not most eyes. Bon, he whispered. The mouse returns to the cheese. His trap was already working. Earlier that evening, he had laid groundwork with the subtlety of a man arranging chess pieces, never revealing his hand, yet guiding every move. At dinner, he had engaged the household in light conversation. Lily had been quiet, her gaze fixed on her plate, though once or twice she had looked toward Sami with something akin to worry. Sami himself maintained an air of brooding irritation, scarcely touching his food. The butler, Mr. Poirot, performed his duties flawlessly, but his eyes darted often toward Lady Samina. And Lady Samina, she remained regal, poised, but her hands trembled faintly when she reached for her glass. It was not fear, Poirot noted. It was something else, perhaps an unspoken burden. By 10 o'clock, the household had retired, though not entirely. Poirot could feel the restless tension simmering in the walls, as if the house itself anticipated the outcome of tonight's events. Now, he positioned himself at the far end of the west corridor, choosing a small alcove draped with a velvet curtain as his vantage point. From here, he could see the study door clearly, though he remained concealed in shadow. Time ticked on. A clock chimed 11. Moments later, the softest footfall echoed, a quiet, almost delicate tread. Poirot focused. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with careful steps toward Lady Samina's door. The silhouette was small, slight, unexpected. Phoebe. The young maid. Poirot remained perfectly still as she reached the study, glanced over her shoulder, and slowly turned the handle. No hesitation. No trembling now. He followed silently. The study was dark except for the faint silver light of the moon filtering through the tall windows. Phoebe crept to the writing desk, the same desk Lady Samina used to keep the small safe beneath. Kneeling, she reached into her apron pocket and withdrew something metallic. A key. Poirot stepped forward. Mademoiselle, he said softly. Phoebe gasped, spinning around, the key slipping from her fingers with a sharp metallic clink on the floor. Monsieur Poirot. I didn't. Poirot raised a hand in calming assurance. Sure, child. No hysteria, if you please. I merely wish to understand. Phoebe backed away until she hit the side of the desk. Tears welled instantly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. I swear I wasn't stealing. Poirot approached her gently. Then tell me, mon enfant, what was your purpose here at this hour? Phoebe bit her lip, trembling. I needed to get something from the safe. Something important. Before Poirot could question her further, footsteps thundered down the hall. The door burst open. Sami stormed into the room, his face twisted with fury. What the devil is going on here? Poirot turned slightly. Monsieur Sami, your timing is becoming a habit. Phoebe? Sami barked. What were you doing with that safe? Phoebe flinched. Nothing. I wasn't. Poirot interjected smoothly, we do not raise our voices. The truth emerges more clearly when spoken softly. But Sami ignored him. You little thief. I should have known. Enough. Poirot's tone sliced through the room with sudden authority. Sami froze mid-step, startled. Poirot stepped calmly between them. There is no evidence, none whatsoever, that this girl is a thief. But she's trying to open the safe. Sami snapped. Poirot lifted the fallen key. Indeed. With Lady Samina's own spare key. Which a thief would hardly possess. Mademoiselle Phoebe, how did you come by this? Phoebe rubbed her tears away with the heel of her hand. Mr. Poirot gave it to me. The room went still. Sami's eyes widened. Poirot? Poirot nodded slowly. I suspected as much. At that moment, another figure appeared at the doorway, Lady Samina herself, wrapped in a shawl, her expression pale with worry. Monsieur Poirot? I heard raised voices. Poirot bowed slightly. Lady Samina, your presence is timely. Matters are coming to light. Mr. Poirot appeared behind her, equally startled at the scene before him. Madam, I assure you. Assure us later, Poirot said, raising a hand. He turned back to Phoebe. Please, child. Tell us the truth. Phoebe sniffled shakily. Mr. Poirot said, he said Lady Samina kept something in the safe. Something that belonged to Mr. Sami's late uncle. A letter. And he told me I had to get it before someone else did. A letter. Lady Samina's face drained of color. Sami stepped forward slowly, his voice dangerously low. What letter? Poirot watched Lady Samina intently. Her silence was telling, deafening. Poirot took a protective step toward her. Madam, don't. Poirot's words cut sharply through the rising chaos. Lady Samina, perhaps the time for secrecy has passed. She closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice trembled. It is true. There is a letter. Sami's expression contorted. From my uncle. Yes, she whispered. He wrote it shortly before he died. And he entrusted it to me. Why hide it? Sami demanded. Lady Samina sank onto the nearest chair, her composure cracking. Because it contains his final wishes. Wishes that would devastate this household. I feared it would tear the family apart. Sami stepped closer, breath trembling with anger. And what, pray tell, did he write? Lady Samina looked at Poirot, as though seeking permission, or strength. Poirot nodded gently. The truth will bring clarity, madam. It always does. She inhaled deeply. Then, in barely more than a whisper, she answered. He wrote that he intended to change the will again, and leave the entire estate not to Sami, but to Lily. The room erupted, Sami's shout of disbelief, Lily's gasp of horror as she entered unnoticed behind Lady Samina, Phoebe's choked sob, and Poirot's desperate, Madam, you should not have. But Poirot remained utterly calm, speaking above the noise with a quiet certainty that silenced them all. And thus, he said, the motives shine clearly. Buried resentments. Hidden loyalties. A letter that could topple everything. He looked at each face in turn. But who sought to steal it? That, Ms. Amis, is the final thread yet to be revealed. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Dark. The uproar in Lady Samina's study echoed long after the confrontation ended. Though the participants had dispersed to their rooms, some in anger, some in fear, and some simply overwhelmed, the atmosphere in Rosehill Court remained charged with the kind of tension that clung to the walls like damp fog. Poirot stood alone in the corridor, hands clasped neatly behind his back, as the last of the footsteps faded into silence. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. A missing jewel. A concealed letter. A divided inheritance. And a household trembling beneath a web of lies. It was, he reflected, almost too perfect. "Non," he murmured softly. "It is never so convenient." He turned toward the direction of the conservatory, where faint light still glowed. Someone had not gone to bed. Inside the conservatory, Lily sat curled on a wicker chair, her red eyes fixed on the moonlit garden beyond the glass. She started slightly when she noticed Poirot entering, but she did not rise. "You are troubled, mademoiselle," Poirot observed gently. Lily laughed bitterly. "Is anyone in this house not troubled, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot walked to the small table where a single lantern burned softly. "Some troubles speak loudly. Others whisper. And some," he gestured toward her, "hide behind silence." Lily's hands tightened around her shawl. "It isn't fair. None of it. I never asked for anything. And now there's a letter saying the estate should be mine? It doesn't make sense." Poirot regarded her closely. "Tell me, mademoiselle, did you know of this letter before tonight?" "No," she insisted, shaking her head. "Never." "I swear it." Poirot nodded, noting her genuine distress. "Then let us consider what it means." Someone knew about the letter. Someone feared its contents, or hoped to gain from them. Lily pressed a hand to her temple. "But who? Sami? Mr. Farrow? Mother? Even Olya, she looked terrified earlier." Poirot raised one finger. "Ah. Observe, when a house trembles, it is because every person inside carries something heavy. Secrets are like stones, they weigh differently on each shoulder." Lily looked up at him, confusion and fear mingling in her expression. "Monsieur Poirot, do you think Sami could have stolen the sapphire crescent? Or tried to get the letter?" Poirot paused before answering. "Suspicion is a dangerous fire, mademoiselle. It warms when you are cold, yes, but it burns everything if left unattended." She lowered her eyes, defeated. "I just want the truth." Poirot gave a gentle smile. "And so you shall have it." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "Tell me, Lily, where was Olya during the chaos earlier?" "She was in her room," Lily answered without hesitation. "But I don't think she stayed there. I thought I heard her footsteps moving about. She seemed anxious." Poirot nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle." He had enough for now. The corridor outside Olya's room on the upper floor was unusually quiet. Poirot approached the door and knocked softly. No answer. He knocked again. "Mademoiselle Olya? May I speak with you a moment?" Still nothing. Poirot frowned. Olya was spirited, emotional, but not rude. It was unlike her to ignore a direct address, especially from him. He tried the handle. The door opened. Her room was empty. More significantly, her window was open. A cold wind stirred the curtains, bringing with it the scent of wet grass and distant earth. Poirot stepped to the window and looked out. The drop was not far, 2 meters at most, and the soft ground below showed faint indentations. Footprints. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Alice, where have you run off to, little one?" He followed the prints across the lawn toward the old storage shed near the edge of the woods. The night was dark, but Poirot's lantern illuminated the path in a soft golden arc. As he neared the shed, he heard hushed voices. One sharp. One shaky. Poirot held his breath and moved closer. Olia's voice trembled. "You said you would help me. You promised." A deep, steady voice responded, "And I will. But not if you panic." Poirot stepped into the doorway. "Mademoiselle Olia." "Monsieur Poirot." A most unusual place for a midnight conversation. Olia gasped and drew back. Poirot stiffened, his expression shifting from irritation to alarm. "Poirot," Poirot said with forced calm. "This is not what it looks like." Poirot closed the door behind him gently. "None? Then it is fortunate I am here to observe what it truly is." Olia's hands clenched. I didn't steal anything, Monsieur Poirot." "I swear it." Poirot spoke kindly. "I do not accuse. I ask only that you speak the truth." She hesitated, then whispered, "Mr. Poirot said he knew who stole the sapphire crescent." Poirot's gaze moved to the butler. "Indeed?" "A generous offer." Poirot swallowed. "I told her someone was trying to frame her. She came to me for advice." Poirot's voice softened dangerously. "Oh, you are very quick to offer help, Monsieur Poirot. Especially when it concerns secrets that conveniently place you at the center." Poirot's jaw tightened. Olia stepped forward. "I only left my room because I was scared. Everyone thinks I took it. The way they looked at me this morning." Poirot raised a reassuring hand. "Calm yourself, child. Innocent people fear the shadows only because guilt hides among them." Olia sank onto a wooden crate, tears welling. "I didn't take the jewel. I didn't touch the letter. I just want everything to stop." Poirot turned to Poirot. "And you, monsieur? Why this clandestine meeting?" Poirot hesitated before speaking. "Because I feared what Sami might do. If he believes the letter threatens his inheritance, he may go to extremes. I was merely trying to protect the girl." Poirot studied him. He was lying. But not entirely. Poirot filed that detail away. He looked at Olia. "One final question, mademoiselle. Earlier today, when you first spoke with me, you appeared frightened." "Of whom?" Olia's lips quivered. I can't." Poirot leaned closer. "You can. And you must." Her voice broke in a whisper. "Of Sami." Poirot exhaled sharply, as though relieved, or perhaps confirming something. Poirot straightened, adjusting his cuffs. The picture was becoming clearer. Motivations overlapping. Loyalties bleeding into fear. But one truth stood out. The thief of the jewel, of the letter of peace within this house, was still hiding. And tonight, Poirot felt, he was closer than ever. As he left the shed, lantern in hand, the wind picked up, swirling leaves around his feet. His moustache twitched in the cold. "Bon," he murmured. "The stage is set. The actors reveal themselves. Now the little grey cells must complete their dance." He looked back at the looming silhouette of Rosehill Court. "Tomorrow," Poirot said softly, "the truth shall begin to surface." Chapter 7. The web tightens ***. The dawn broke over Rosehill Court with a pale, hesitant light, filtering through the frost-covered windows and casting a cold glow upon the grand halls. Inside, the household moved with unusual quiet, servants exchanged wary glances, and even the usually confident Lily appeared subdued, clutching a shawl around her shoulders. The atmosphere was one of nervous anticipation. Hercule Poirot, however, felt nothing but focus. The events of the previous night had revealed more than words. Footprints, whispers, and subtle misalignments of objects had spoken volumes. He was certain that tonight, the truth would emerge fully, but patience remained his greatest ally. Walking through the corridors, Poirot observed every detail, the way the curtains swayed despite the closed windows, the subtle scuff marks along the polished floors, the faint smell of lavender from the conservatory, details invisible to anyone else, but not to him. Each spoke of movement, tension, and hidden intentions. He paused at the drawing room, where Lady Samina was already seated, sipping tea with a measured hand. Her face carried both worry and determination, the unmistakable duality of a matriarch protecting her family while confronting betrayal. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I cannot bear this suspense much longer." "Who would do such a thing? And why?" Poirot inclined his head gracefully. "Madam, the motives are rarely simple. A theft, a letter, a duel, they are but threads in a more intricate tapestry. And the tapestry is woven by the hands of those closest to you." Lady Samina's eyes widened, but she said nothing. The morning passed slowly. Poirot observed the household without interference, his presence barely noticeable. He watched Sami move through the halls with a forced calm, his eyes occasionally darting toward Lady Samina. He watched Lily, who seemed to flinch at every creak of the floorboards. He observed Pharaoh, the ever-watchful butler, whose loyalty now seemed double-edged. And he kept his keen gaze on Olia, whose fear and innocence were both apparent, yet something in her hesitance hinted at knowledge, not guilt. Poirot made no attempt to interrogate anyone directly. Instead, he walked silently, noting conversations, overhearing fragments of dialogue, observing gestures that spoke louder than words. By mid-afternoon, he had compiled a list in his mind. Sami, motivated by inheritance, impatient, occasionally reckless. Pharaoh, protective, possibly manipulative, aware of hidden truths. Phoebe, frightened, trustworthy, but easily influenced. Olia, innocent, yet aware of secrets, emotionally vulnerable. Lily, unaware of letter initially, but emotionally connected to potential inheritance. Poirot smiled faintly. The threads were taut now. One more subtle move, and the web would reveal its structure. That evening, Poirot requested a family meeting in the drawing room. The household assembled reluctantly, each member carrying an air of tension. Lady Samina seated herself at the head of the room, her posture regal despite the anxiety etched on her face. Sami leaned against the mantelpiece, arms crossed, while Lily and Olia sat quietly in chairs by the window. Pharaoh and Phoebe hovered near the back, their expressions unreadable. Poirot stood near the fireplace, hands folded, surveying the room with an expression of calm authority. "Miss Amos," he began, "tonight, we shall attempt to clarify certain misunderstandings. Certain events which have disturbed this household." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The household remained silent, though the air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. First, Poirot continued, "We must speak of the sapphire crescent. It vanished mysteriously, leaving an impression upon the display cabinet, and he gestured toward the clean smudge, a message, subtle yet telling. He turned slowly toward Phoebe. "Child, you discovered this item's disappearance first. You also observed someone else that night. Is that correct?" Phoebe nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Who?" Poirot asked gently. Phoebe swallowed, eyes darting to Pharaoh. I don't want to say." I'm afraid. Poirot's eyes softened. Fear is natural. But courage brings clarity. You may speak now, without consequence. She hesitated, then whispered, It was Mr. Poirot. He moved the jewel. A hush fell over the room. Poirot's face remained composed, but a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. Poirot raised a hand. Silence, Esselineuvous Plat. We shall not interrupt. Continue. Phoebe took a deep breath. He said it was to protect the family. That someone might take it for selfish reasons, and that he had to hide it temporarily. Poirot finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. It is true, Monsieur Poirot. I did move the crescent. But never to steal. I feared the jewel's disappearance might be misattributed to an innocent person, Olia. Sammy's eyes narrowed. You mean to say you accused the girl without proof? Poirot inclined his head. Only in precaution. It was temporary, and I never intended harm. Poirot nodded slowly. Very well. The crescent is recovered. Poirot hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Safe now, hidden from sight. I did not want the household to panic. Poirot's gaze swept the room. And the letter, Madame Samina? Was it related to these actions? Lady Samina looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Poirot feared that the revelation of my late husband's wishes could spark chaos. He acted to prevent that. Poirot stroked his moustache. Ah, so we see the motives intertwining, fear, protection, and misjudgment. But there is still one matter unresolved. All eyes turned to him. The final piece of the puzzle, the one who sought to exploit this fear for their own gain. Poirot's gaze moved deliberately across the room, settling on Sami. You, Monsieur Sami, have reason to act rashly. Your inheritance threatened, your patience tested, you sought to gain from confusion, and yet you underestimated the loyalty and cunning around you. Sami stiffened. I did nothing wrong. Poirot's eyes remained steady. You took no jewel, no letter, but you attempted manipulation, subtle threats, and intimidation. The footprints, the shadowed movements, they were yours. Not to steal, but to test the household, to see who might falter. Sami's anger boiled over. You have no proof. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but proof is unnecessary for the little grey cells. Observation suffices. Your tension, your furtive glances, your misplaced steps, all these told the story before words were spoken. Lily and Olia exchanged astonished glances. Phoebe let out a small sigh of relief. Even Lady Samina looked stunned, but relieved. Poirot's voice softened. So, Ms. Amos, we now see clearly. The crescent is safe. The letter's intentions have been revealed. And the household may, at last, breathe without the weight of misjudgment pressing upon them. Poirot bowed his head in quiet respect. Phoebe wiped her eyes. Sami remained tense, but the edge of guilt had begun to pierce through his bravado. Poirot glanced around the room one last time. And now, we wait. Tonight, when the household sleeps, the final truth shall be revealed, and peace may return to Rosehill Court. The detective's eyes flickered toward the window, the moonlight glinting off the frost. Outside, the world was still, yet the household within held its breath. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, a faint smile touching his lips. The threads had tightened, the web was near completion, and soon, the little grey cells would untangle the final knot. Chapter 8. The Revelation ***. The household of Rosehill Court had never seemed quieter. The hush of midnight hung heavy, muffling even the footsteps of the night watchman. Outside, a thin mist drifted across the grounds, silvering the lawns and hedges, and a soft moonlight gleamed on the frost. Inside, every person still awake felt the weight of suspense pressing upon their shoulders. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, illuminated by the warm glow of a single lamp. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the faces gathered before him: Lady Samina, still regal despite exhaustion; Lily, tense but watchful; Olia, pale and frightened; Sami, tight-lipped and restless; Pharaoh, composed but uneasy; and Phoebe, who clutched her apron with nervous fingers. Poirot folded his hands neatly, letting a brief silence draw attention. The weight of expectation was almost tangible. He allowed them a moment to squirm in suspense. Then, in his calm, deliberate tone, he began. "Miss Amos," he said, "we have observed many threads of behavior, many shadows in this house, and yet the truth is not merely the sum of suspicion. No. The truth, as always, lies in careful observation, in small details overlooked by the inattentive eye." He paused, letting the room's silence deepen. "Let us consider the events carefully. The sapphire crescent disappeared. The heirloom, precious and fragile, vanished from its cabinet without any sign of forced entry. Some believed the young Mademoiselle Olia responsible." Olia flinched slightly. Poirot smiled reassuringly at her. "But we saw her first in the conservatory, silent, frightened. Her footsteps and her presence were not those of a thief. Non, Mademoiselle, your conscience is clear. You were merely a witness, and a frightened one at that." Phoebe breathed a small sigh of relief, while Olia's eyes glistened with tears. Poirot then turned toward Mr. Pharaoh. "And you, monsieur, acted out of loyalty. You moved the jewel to protect the household, not to steal. Your motives were honorable, though perhaps poorly executed." Pharaoh inclined his head slightly, relieved but still uneasy. Poirot's eyes then settled upon Sami. The young man shifted, uncomfortable beneath the detective's unwavering gaze. "Ah, Monsieur Sami. Your tension was apparent, yes? Your glances, your pacing, your subtle attempts to manipulate the household, all visible to the trained eye. You sought to test others, to see who might falter. Yet you did not touch the jewel, nor the letter. Your greed was restrained by fear of discovery. This is fortunate, for your actions, though misguided, do not constitute theft." Sami clenched his fists but said nothing. Poirot let the pause linger, then continued. "Now, the final matter, the most delicate, and the one which has caused the most distress." He glanced at Lady Samina. "Madam, the disappearance of the sapphire crescent was not motivated by greed alone. There was a subtle attempt to frighten you, to disturb your household. Someone hoped that by creating suspicion, chaos would follow. And that someone was much closer than you might imagine." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Poirot. He held up a hand. "Observe, Miss Amos, the pattern of movements, the traces left behind. The footprint in the conservatory soil, the shifted vase, the disturbed lilies, the faint lavender powder on the cabinet, these were all clues. Not random, no. Purposeful. But overlooked by those who saw only the obvious." His gaze swept the group again, resting finally on Phoebe. The young maid looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. "Ah, Mademoiselle Phoebe," Poirot said softly, "do not be afraid. You did not steal the jewel. You did not manipulate anyone. Yet, you acted, oh, yes, you acted out of a sense of justice, or perhaps curiosity. You retrieved the key, you approached the safe, and in your panic, you nearly revealed the truth. But the true architect of mischief was not you." Phoebe let out a shaky breath, nodding silently. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, then he addressed the room as a whole. "The person who sought to create chaos, to hide behind fear and shadows, is one whose loyalty seemed beyond question. He gestured toward Mr. Poirot. You, monsieur, were most willing to protect the household, yes. But your intentions were entirely honorable. Your fingerprints are innocent. You acted as a guardian, albeit one who may have underestimated the human heart. Poirot's eyes flickered, betraying a mixture of relief and pride. Poirot's gaze then shifted, slow and deliberate, to Lily. Lily, he said, his voice calm, yet carrying an edge of precision. Your role has been largely passive, observing the household's tension. Yet your very presence, your relationships, and your reactions influence the course of events. Lily's face paled. Monsieur Poirot, Patience, mademoiselle. You acted only from innocence. Poirot turned his attention to Lady Samina. And you, madam, carried the weight of secrecy, for the letter's contents could have disrupted everything. Yet you were not aware of the subtleties that followed, nor could you act against them. You remained above reproach. Lady Samina exhaled slowly. Poirot then allowed a small smile. And so we come to the heart of the matter. The true instigator of distress, the one who attempted to mislead, to create suspicion, and to frighten this household, was none other than. He paused dramatically, letting the silence stretch. The very person least suspected, Olya. A gasp filled the room. Olya's hands flew to her mouth. Me, she whispered. No. I didn't. Poirot held up a hand, gentle but firm. Ah, mademoiselle, you did not steal the jewel. You did not touch the letter. But your actions, your presence in the conservatory, your panic, your hiding of the footprints, these were enough to mislead everyone. You were trying, in your youthful confusion, to protect your mother, yet inadvertently created fear and suspicion. Olya's eyes filled with tears. I only wanted to stop mother from being upset. I never meant. Poirot smiled kindly. Exactment, mademoiselle. You acted from love, not malice. But love, when mixed with fear, can sometimes appear as something it is not. He turned finally to Sami. And you see, Monsieur Sami, your impatience could have compounded the matter, but it was your restraint that allowed the threads to remain untangled. The jewel is recovered, the letter's intentions are clear, and the household may now breathe freely. Sami lowered his head, silence falling over him. Poirot folded his hands, gazing at each member of the household with serene authority. Miss Amos, the lesson is simple yet profound. Truth reveals itself in the smallest details, a footprint, a faint powder, a shifted vase. And the human heart, when observed carefully, leaves its own clues, fear, love, loyalty, and error. By attending to these, one can untangle even the most intricate of mysteries. He gestured toward the mantel, where the sapphire crescent now rested safely in its display. The jewel is returned. The letter's secret revealed. And the household, I hope, shall now know peace. Olya ran to her mother, tears streaming freely. Lily and Sami exchanged a quiet, tentative glance, and even Poirot allowed a faint, approving nod. Poirot watched, his sharp eyes softening with satisfaction. The web of fear and suspicion had been untangled, not through force or confrontation, but through patience, observation, and the power of the little grey cells. Finally, he straightened, adjusting his cuffs. And now, Miss Amos, he said gently, we may at last enjoy a night of quiet reflection, for tomorrow, Rosehill Court shall awaken not in fear, but in the light of truth. The household exhaled as one. Relief mingled with lingering awe. And in the quiet of the drawing room, Hercule Poirot allowed himself a small, private smile, the satisfaction of another mystery resolved, another household restored to order.